Consuelo Vanderbilt is often remembered as the perfect Gilded Age debutante who married a duke and became a duchess. Photographs show an elegant young woman, slender-necked, delicate-featured and composed. In Society columns of the day, the story seemed simple. The beautiful daughter of an American railroad fortune became the Duchess of Marlborough and entered Blenheim Palace as a triumphant dollar princess. The public narrative celebrated romance, rank, and spectacular social success. The archives reveal a very different story. Private letters, diary entries, and legal records slowly uncovered that this famous marriage functioned less as a fairy tale and more as a carefully engineered financial and social transaction. At the center of this mechanism stood Consuelo, yet she was not alone. Her mother, Alva Vanderbilt, was determined, brilliant, and utterly relentless. The Duke of Marlborough needed an enormous infusion of cash. The Vanderbilts demanded a title that would silence their critics. The transatlantic marriage market itself needed a symbolic, dazzling success. Consuelo stood precisely at the intersection of these three powerful forces. Her enormous fortune, her undeniable beauty, and her mother's intense ambitions made her one of the most valuable young women of her generation. Simultaneously, these same factors made her one of the most constrained. She was born in 1877 into a world already shaped entirely by strategy. Her father, William Kissam Vanderbilt, managed a colossal inheritance built on railroads and shipping. Her mother, Alva, refused to remain in the shadow of older New York families who dismissed the Vanderbilts as vulgar newcomers. From early childhood, Consuelo lived inside a deliberate, decade-long project. This project aimed to prove that money could purchase not only mansions and paintings, but a permanent place in the very architecture of social power. Every aspect of her life became preparation for the competitive marriage market. Her education, her clothing, her posture, and her speech were all part of a rigorous training program. The houses of her childhood were not mere displays of wealth, they were instruments. The grand mansion at 660 Fifth Avenue and later the famous Marble House in Newport were built for a clear purpose. Vast halls, marble staircases and mirrored drawing rooms formed dramatic stages upon which a daughter could be presented and evaluated. These are examples of architectural sophistication used for dynastic ends. Hidden corridors allowed staff to operate invisibly, sustaining the illusion of effortless grace. Ballrooms turned guests into status. Lists served as social diagrams, placing mothers, daughters, and eligible men in calculated, strategic proximity. In these spaces, Alva tested and refined the formidable skills she would later use to negotiate her daughter's future. Within the Vanderbilt household, female hierarchies and alliances quietly shaped daily life. Alva possessed a strong will and a clear vision for the family's ultimate position. Consuelo, naturally shy and sensitive, often found herself caught between deep filial loyalty and her own private desire for affection. Letters written later in life describe hours spent being painfully fitted into corsets so tight they sometimes caused fainting spells. Posture lessons left her young muscles constantly aching. Every minute detail prepared her body, as much as her mind, to serve as a flawless presentation piece in a ruthless social arena. The beautiful daughter would not simply marry, she would complete a non-negotiable strategic alliance. Across the Atlantic, British aristocratic families faced a different kind of crisis. They possessed the grand estates, the ancient titles, and the powerful names, but they did not guarantee reliable cash flow. Agricultural income had declined sharply for decades, yet the costs of maintaining enormous houses, hundreds of staff, and vast grounds remained astronomically high. Some dukes and earls possessed more priceless paintings than liquid assets. For many, American heiresses represented a desperately needed lifeline. These American fortunes could repair leaking roofs, pay off generations of debt, and secure the future of lineages stretching back centuries. In return, American families received something money alone could not purchase: integration into Europe's hereditary hierarchy. This systematic exchange produced the phenomenon later known as the dollar princesses. Young American women, sometimes still in their late teens, arrived in London for the social season with huge dowries and carefully managed public images. Their mothers, often more ambitious and certainly more involved than their husbands, acted as primary negotiators. Marriage contracts frequently resembled business agreements. They specified exact sums earmarked for estate repairs, crucial investments, and joint household expenses. The bride's personal wishes, when they dared conflict with the established family program, carried little formal weight. Consuelo's value in this structured marriage market rested on three fundamental pillars. The first was fortune. The Vanderbilt name signaled a level of wealth almost unmatched in the United States. Her dowry offered the Duke not only comfort but outright rescue. For Charles Spencer Churchill, the 9th Duke of Marlborough, Blenheim Palace carried enormous historical prestige but also crippling financial demands. Restoring and maintaining such a monumental property required capital he simply did not possess. Consuelo's fortune promised to stabilize the estate and secure his position for a generation. The second pillar was her beauty. Contemporary descriptions consistently record her as one of the great beauties of her generation. She was tall, graceful, with soft, elegant features and a refined bearing. She perfectly fit the idealized image of a duchess in both British and American eyes. Portraits and photographs reinforced this perception, circulating widely through newspapers and magazines. She was consciously transformed into a globally recognizable figure. In a marriage market where status operated visually as well as financially, her appearance actively increased her negotiating value. The third pillar, perhaps the most potent of all, was the pure force of Alva's ambition. Alva Vanderbilt believed deeply that wealth without ultimate recognition remained perpetually incomplete. Earlier battles with established social leaders, such as Caroline Astor, had taught her that genuine social acceptance required more than simply having the most money. Securing a ducal title would settle the argument permanently. By marrying her daughter to a duke, Alva could reposition the entire family from contested newcomers to bona fide international aristocracy. This was not a vague hope. It was a clearly defined dynastic objective. The actual mechanics of the courtship reveal the financial machinery behind the veneer of romance. Introductions in London drawing rooms led to carefully supervised brief encounters. Correspondence between the families passed entirely through parental hands. Behind the scenes, the lawyers began drafting the terms of the enormous transaction. The contemplated dowry reached amounts that would have seemed completely unimaginable just one generation earlier. Conditions attached to the money specified payments for estate works and detailed financial restructuring. Two distinct systems, American industrial wealth and British hereditary privilege, met formally at the negotiation table. Consuelo's private wishes conflicted sharply with this family program. She deeply loved another man, an American, and hoped for a different, simpler future. Letters and later memoirs describe her tears, her sustained resistance, and her desperate attempts to delay or escape the match. Alva responded with intense and escalating pressure. Emotional appeals about duty and sacrifice tragically blended with outright threats and staged illness. One famous account describes Alva feigning a collapse and dramatically implying that her daughter's refusal would cause her mother's death. Under that overwhelming weight, the daughter signed away her future. This dynamic between mother and daughter shows both determination and tragedy. Here was a woman who believed she was securing the family's destiny, and a girl who had been taught that obedience was the ultimate price of loyalty. On the day of the wedding in 1895, reporters focused on the stunning jewels, the spectacular gowns, and the illustrious list of guests. Marble House glittered with thousands of flowers and lights. Carriages lined Newport's streets for blocks. The public spectacle confirmed for most observers that the Vanderbilt project had decisively succeeded. An American girl had become a duchess. A colossal fortune had joined an ancient title. For Alva, the ceremony represented a flawlessly executed strategy. For Consuelo, it marked the closing of one set of choices and the beginning of a predetermined role scripted almost entirely by others. Life at Blenheim Palace quickly exposed the vast gap between expectation and reality. The building itself was monumental and imposing, symbolizing national history and aristocratic power. Yet inside, heating costs, staffing needs, and constant maintenance struggles relentlessly persisted. The massive infusion of American money certainly alleviated the financial pressures, but it did not and could not guarantee happiness. The marriage between Consuelo and the Duke quickly revealed profound personal incompatibilities. He valued rank, tradition, and control. She sought genuine affection and warm companionship. Domestic life rapidly devolved into a series of formal performances. They maintained a public union that masked a severe private distance. Within this setting, female power dynamics extended beyond mother and daughter. British society brought its own strict hierarchy of powerful women. There were duchesses, marchionesses, countesses, and powerful hostesses with long experience managing vast estates, complicated servant hierarchies, and demanding social calendars. Consuelo entered this network as both an outsider and a massive financial asset. Some women admired her fortune and her quiet elegance. Others viewed her as a symbol of American intrusion and cultural vulgarity. Her position required constant, exhausting navigation of unspoken rules, from seating arrangements at state dinners to choosing which charities and patronages to support. Letters from this period reveal a woman slowly developing an inner life separate from the image presented to the world. She became involved in philanthropic projects, particularly those focused on working women and children, providing a sense of meaningful purpose beyond titles and society balls. Extensive travels, serious reading, and new friendships created fresh perspectives outside the rigid confines of Blenheim. Over time, the emotional strain of the unhappy marriage made the stark contrast between public praise and private reality increasingly difficult to endure. Ironically, the very force that had once constrained her, her mother's formidable will, shifted direction entirely. As the decades passed, Alva came to publicly regret the severity of her earlier methods. Changing social values and the rising acceptance of divorce among elites altered the landscape completely. When Consuelo eventually sought a legal separation and then an annulment, Alva actively supported the effort. The woman who had once insisted that her daughter's feelings were irrelevant now offered public testimony, admitting that coercion had completely shaped the original marriage decision. In this striking reversal, female agency unfolded in a different, powerful form, a mother publicly confessing her own role in a system she now wished to help her daughter challenge. Consuelo's later life marked a quiet but profound transformation. After divorcing the Duke, she married Jacques Balsam, a French aviator and textile heir, in 1921. This second marriage, which was more companionate and genuinely chosen, allowed her to build a true partnership rather than sustain a dynastic alliance. The change in household scale, moving from Blenheim's monumental architecture to more manageable residences, reflected a deep shift from seeking symbolic grandeur to prioritizing lived comfort. Her philanthropic and cultural activities extended across decades, She supported hospitals, critical war relief efforts, and educational causes on an international scale. The intense discipline learned under Alva's rigid regime, her attention to detail, her organisational skill, and her innate understanding of social networks reappeared in projects that did not involve marriage contracts. In this sense, the training originally designed for the Gilded Age marriage market became a powerful toolkit for independent work and self-determination. The Consuelo story reveals several critical patterns that recur across the history of powerful dynasties. First, daughters frequently carried the weight of family ambitions far more visibly than sons. A son typically inherited the name and the business. A daughter, by contrast, embodied the opportunity to directly connect that name to another, more ancient lineage. Her body, her beauty, and her dowry formed a combined asset class, measured and deployed through a chilling mixture of affection and calculation. Second, transatlantic marriages rarely joined only two individuals. They merged entire complex systems, layers of lawyers, powerful bankers, estate managers, famous dressmakers, jewelers, and renowned architects. A union like Consuelo's drew in professionals on both sides of the ocean, each translating one culture's expectations into another's legal and financial framework. Third, the mother-daughter relationship operated tragically as both bond and battlefield. Alva's determination clearly grew from a genuine belief in her duty to protect the family's precarious position and secure her daughter's future. Consuelo's painful obedience sprang from a complex mixture of love, filial fear, and relentless social conditioning. Later, a form of mutual regret and true understanding eventually emerged, but only after years of intense emotional strain. The complexity here powerfully resists simple judgments of either woman. Both women navigated a world where female power often had to cloak itself entirely in maternal concern or wifely duty. Consuelo's life also clarifies the critical difference between the popular story and the underlying structure. The story told in newspapers centered on her beauty, the romance, and the fairy tale transformation. The structure underneath, however, relied entirely on legal documents, huge financial transfers, and dynastic social strategies refined over generations. Behind the elegant wedding report stood trust arrangements, detailed property schedules, and correspondence between lawyers about complex tax implications and future inheritance paths. The human drama unfolded tragically inside a rigid framework designed solely to keep fortunes and titles perpetually intact. Long after her death, Consuelo's memoir, The Glitter and the Gold, added another vital layer of understanding. In it, she described the dazzling gilded surfaces of her youth and the heavy costs hidden beneath them. The narrative did not present her as a simple victim. It acknowledged her enormous privilege, her extensive travel, and her social access, while also tracing the severe emotional price of being treated entirely as a dynastic instrument. The book effectively rescued a more complex, nuanced version of her from the earlier, simple image of the obedient dollar princess. Her story continues to resonate because it illuminates precisely how these vast systems worked, rather than only what they visually looked like. It shows a marriage market where young women could be stunningly powerful as financial assets, yet surprisingly powerless as individual human beings. It demonstrates how mothers, operating without any formal political office or vote, could nevertheless shape international alliances through their drawing rooms and their relentless private correspondence. It reveals how a single American dowry could literally rescue a crumbling European palace and redirect the fate of an ancient title. At the same time, her long life arc offers a subtle but profound ironic reversal. The grand marriage that seemed to crown her youth eventually failed and ended. The partnership that followed, chosen later in life and with more self-knowledge, was the one that truly endured. The powerful mother who once forced her into a union later used her influence to help her leave it. The Duchess, who had appeared as a symbol of American conquest of European status, eventually stepped into roles defined more by quiet service than by public spectacle. Beauty and fortune had opened all the doors. Experience and profound reflection changed the way she ultimately walked through them. Within the wider landscape of old money families and their dynastic strategies, Consuelo Vanderbilt stands as both a clear example and a notable exception. As an example, she reflects the immense forces that turned daughters into transatlantic bridges between raw American capital and European title. As an exception, she lived long enough and wrote clearly enough to describe those forces with searing honesty from the very inside. Her life traces a crucial line from the most orchestrated forms of female deployment to more self-directed uses of her education, her organizational training, and her social position. In that long journey, the figure of the Dollar Princess becomes far more than a simple nickname. It becomes a critical lens on how wealth, gender, and personal ambition intertwined during the Gilded Age. It shows how individual women navigated colossal systems that were designed long before their births. Consuelo Vanderbilt entered that system as a carefully groomed asset. Over time, she emerged as an interpreter of it, one of the rare, clear voices able to show what it cost, what it built, and how it truly felt to live at its very centre. The day of her wedding in 1895 remains a poignant image. Consuelo, dressed in stunning finery and jewels, wept visibly behind her bridal veil, a detail only whispered among guests, yet preserved in later memory. This single image of distress on a day of supposed triumph exposes the cruel machinery beneath the glittering surface. The beautiful daughter of American railroad wealth had been transformed into an indispensable asset and delivered to secure her family's ultimate social victory. The emotional victory belonged elsewhere. Consuelo, the coerced bride, endured the public spectacle, survived the private unhappiness, and eventually stepped out of the role designed for her. Through divorce, remarriage, and a lifetime of purposeful activity, she transformed from an emblem of sacrifice into an example of resilience. Her life does not erase the damage of the original coercion, nor does it present a simple tale of triumph. Instead, it shows how a woman, raised as an object in a system, could, over time, become a subject in her own right, using the very tools that once confined her. Alva's power as a mother and strategist was real, and her intelligence considerable. Yet the plan she forced onto her daughter achieved only partial, temporary success. The social prestige she sought proved fragile. The personal agency she discounted proved enduring. That is the quiet satisfaction in the story. The Duchess, who once wept behind a veil, did not remain a tragic figure frozen in place. She adjusted, learned, chose again, and built a life that reflected her own values more than her mother's ambitions. The system of Gilded Age marriages, with all its contracts and corridors, could not ultimately dictate the final chapters of her life. In those later chapters, the balance of power shifts. The daughter, not the mother, becomes the central author, turning a transaction conceived to display wealth into a narrative of character shaped by adversity and finally by choice.